Mud Architect, a conversation about art and invention. This video is a record of artist William Daley creating a new ceramic pot while discussing in a conversational approach his ideas about art, making art, and the continuing struggle to keep invention fresh. Daley is an individual who is fiercely devoted to his work. He has been a dedicated teacher who has an impressive array of former students that have become leaders in the art and crafts movement. He is an emotional and spiritual individual whose impish sense of humor, intelligence, and warmth contributed immensely to his students and colleagues. My curiosity about his working process and what was behind it led me to ask Bill if I could join him in his studio as he constructed a piece and discussed his thoughts about making art. The results show to a degree his methodology, but more importantly reveals some of the essence of what he means by giving form to spirit.
There's something about necessity, authenticity, clarity about intention, and doing it. The notion between you think so that you can have belief, and you believe so that you can have trust, and you trust so that you can practice. Thought is a kind of action, whether you act on it or not. In your mind. We know that from making stuff. And the only reason for thought is so that you can believe in a broad general sense. And then the reason why people need to believe is so they can trust something, to survive. So I turn that around in terms of, now I think of it, it's an easy formula. Art is practice, so they can trust themselves, their ideas, their mechanics, their process, to make something that is authentic, that they believe deeply. And the reason for that is that it embodies primary, essential, gut-level thought. And so you can turn it both ways. And I think that in some intuitive sense, I really became informed about the structure of that in my own doing. I think being an artist, that trilogy of things, is that down at the bottom of what we do is we have a kind of necessity to give form, and I call it giving form to spirit. Giving yourself to form becoming. We live with a kind of necessity, and that's the ineffable, whatever it is. There are only three kinds of pots, in a way. One is a plate, and a plate it really only has one side. It has two sides, but it's all about one face. And a bowl is the quintessential pot, because it's equally about its outside and its inside, by my definition, because I'm an inside-outside obsessive. So the other kind of a pot there is a cylinder, which it's just all about the outside. Now that the hole in the cylinder is like looking down inside a well, and I think it's a very mysterious kind of shape. But the pot itself is really a thing like a rolling pin that you read this way. But a bowl you can read this way, that way, this way, that way, so on. So it's just a much more complex kind of form to consider. And the way it responds to gravity is different. A cylinder is totally in compression above itself. Do you know what I mean? It's a very, very stable form. It's resting on its end. And a bowl, if you think of it as a hemisphere, would only really be resting on a point, and it could be terrifically tippy. So most pots all have a variable size. One of the things that I used to play around with for a number of years was how big did you need to make the bottom so that its footprint would be stable, that it wouldn't be tippy. And a lot of pots that are gorgeous to look at are not stable. Now, early pots, people made bulbous pots like this, and they could then roll them on a surface and have them pour or tip. So there are pitchers that are made to go like this with, not pick them up. So that all of the geometries also can have preferences in terms of usage. The whiskey jugs, the stoneware whiskey jugs, I have some of them upstairs in the kitchen, are shaped so they're perfect for throwing, but they're also perfect for their form. Also, you can take their handle on the lip and you can hold them and pour them out to drink from or to pour into something. So this whole history of the geometries of three kinds of forms that there are interests me, but I've really used them to explore what the relationship is in between the inside and the outside. And the vesica is two circles intersecting, making an eye or a boat form, okay? And it stands for both and. It's a mutuality symbol. And it's half of a Gothic arch, because that's how a Gothic arch is scribed. And there are many pictures, images in cathedrals and things of Christ in a vesica, standing for a mutual expression of God and man, or God in man. So you see it recurring. I've been using it as it's a great form for building in clay because it has two girders on either end of it. But as a form, it's different as it turns, okay? It's just a fabulous kind of form. I'm really into fast art in terms of making the matrix to hold the clay. And a lot of people in ceramic land have an attitude about, we have in the past had an attitude about immediacy and the touch, that the actual finger working of the clay, which I care a lot about, but I have a preset of things that I need to go through before I get to that part. The best part, I like this, but I would like to avoid it, but this is the fastest way to get to where I want to be in having the most, because when you start putting it together and seeing that it's working or not working and then moving the actual things, that's the most exciting part about making, when the forms are becoming, because this is provisional. There's no reason why it has, it's your best guess. All the scuzzy marks on this thing I draw and then I paint it out. You can see that I had triangles in here. I had triangles in there. I had this way too deep and so on. So I've changed this. These tubular, onion-like, whatever kinds of forms these are, were much bigger and so on. So I love doing it. And this wall has like 35 years of drawings under it. It's going to stand on 4 points, 1, 2, 3, and one in the back. And it's going to have a tubular waist. It's going to be like a torus. But this is going to have, you know how a cuspidor that you spit in the saloon has that tapered inside? Well, it'll have a teeny frescum of a cone that will invite you down into the form. But that's on the outside. And so there's a big cone sticking down in maybe. And on the inside it'll go like this. And it'll join this pod and that pod. It should be gorgeous. We don't know that until we see it. You know, well, but that's the exciting part. These are two forms that I made last night, fairly quickly, about an hour apiece maybe, that are going to fit on the bump or fit on the igloo, the vesica igloo. So this is going to be here. But I'm going to put it on like upside down, but it's going to be like this, okay? And this is going to be this part here. You can see that it's going to make an eye shape inside the pot, but that's going to go there, okay? And I haven't made these dubers yet, but I don't need them until a couple days from now when I get my torus in place and so on. part of the thing about making pots too is that bilateral pots are ancient, you know, because of the wheel, but the notion of handles and lips and so on, I'm really caught up. A friend of mine just gave a talk that if you're a sculptor, but if you were a potter, you're always a potter. So that a lot of the forms that I have that read for other reasons, psychic reasons, are coming off the remembrance of handles and other spouts and things of that sort. And my early work, that was a very deliberate thing, and I'm still haven't gotten over it. So I had it all covered, and I just took a piece off of it. And it's fun to see how you can take flat sheets and make them bend, but the clay will stretch and bend around. You cut gussets in it and then lay it over on itself and slice it. And it's just really great activity if you become addicted to it, that you're really making a three-dimensional form out of a flat sheet that's flexible. It just needs to be held up until it sets up. So I took this off so you could see the lines in it. You can see that it lets me play great games with the clay when I'm working. I can change my mind. And I think that, one thing I learned when I was trying to paint, that nothing has to be concluded until it's finished, which is an oxymoron, I guess, almost. But in a way, to me, it means that everything's provisional in terms of until you actually see it. This little tool is like a mini finger. It's a gorgeous tool. It was made by a famous wood guy for me. He copied another one that he had seen, and he made them for a whole class at Anderson Ranch. He made everybody the form, and we all did it with a file. And so you have tools that are like magic objects. If I lose this, I'm in the state of shock until I find it. I don't know if you have that in your thing, but I'm going to join just a little bit of this, and then I'll put one of the windows on. So when you join the clay, simply what you do, and it's soft enough, so you really are pushing it where the crack is, or the seam is, you're pushing the clay from the sides into the seam. So I'll just do a little bit. This next pot is a turn. You know, if you think of a potter's, a turner, was a potter, but a turn it's like doing a riff in jazz. You get a chance with your instrument to do it another way, better. So a lot of times I'll take the forms that I already have and see a possibility for it. And this pot is going to be about that. I hope it ends up being good, but you don't know until you get finished. So my process is not like most potters that immediately they might have sketches, but they don't work from the drawings. So in a sense, I really am a kind of mud architect, I suppose, because my procedures are very much those of someone that goes from drawing to physicality. My system of trying to make something at the axis as clear as I can, but I don't measure, or trying to make it the right height, but I have a measurement, but it's not measured mechanically. So that when you keep doing that over and over in the work, there are whole kinds of, I don't know, you call them eccentricities or what, that kind of counterbalance each other. So that the gesture of the pot in some ways is not mechanical. It's a consequence of, discerning judgment up to the level that you're capable of dealing with it. I think it's one nice thing about what was happening. I don't know what's going to happen next in our field, but my generation spent an awful lot of time and energy working at becoming artists by what we did and kind of defining what that meant for each of us. And I still feel very passionately clear about the path and the validity of it. So while I think I'm a pretty wizard craftsman, I wrote very early in my career that I didn't want to be a craftsman, I wanted to be an artist. So, and I think I don't mean that I've proved it, because in some sense being an artist is not the call of the person that's doing it. Being an artist is a call of something else. But aspiring to it is the call of an artist, and I can say that I try to do that. And I'm still trying to do it. And it's ferociously arrogant on one hand, but I have clear persuasion that I am doing it. So if the pot has some sense of firstness to me, some sense of venturing that I can respond to, it pleases me. If it's been there, done that, even though if it's very nice, in other words, all the parts work and stuff, it's not as satisfying for me to be engaged. It's really a kind of incremental change over a long period of time. These new pots, or these more recent pots though, are using curvilinear languages that I used 35 years ago. I mean, revisiting organic kinds of forms like in the pods. So in a way, the going back toward curved surfaces and softer forms is revisiting something from a long time ago. I don't know what that means, but I'm enjoying it. But you don't know until the pot's done whether it's going to have steam or not. But for me, it can't have steam if it, like, I guess I could make the exact same thing twice, but I'm just not comfortable with it. Even if I like it. I'm lucky I'm going to have a marvelous cross in here. And I'm really interested in the cross, not from a religious standpoint, but it's the main axis between east and west, north and south. And it's the axis of the vertical thing to make 3 dimensions. I mean, you got the X, Y, and this other thing, but spiritually or philosophically, it's the mark of the axis mundi, the medieval line from the ineffable down through human beings into the ground, into the earth. So the Maypole dance, that they did, which celebrated the change of the seasons, and they dance around, but it also is a dance in relation to change and to, and so anyway, so so in a lot of my pots, I love it when I have a chance to either have a whirling geometry or an X, and I've done a lot of things, and of course a cross is the perfect bracing device. I mean, if you make a step this way and you make a step this way, you can hold anything up in the air, so that the metaphysical and the physical are mechanical. So forms that do that I like very much. I mean, where they can be met. So now, one of the good things about the way I work is that I try to do everything while it's soft and moist and put it over the forms, and it allows me to bend the clay to fit over things by just simply having the clay stretch or compress. So it's just a good way to do it. So working with clay is a constant game of trying to thwart gravity. And I think that it's a really neat thing that people that are conceptualists can say all the time, oh, you know, the idea is what counts, and I can make the drawing, and some skilled person can do this for me, and so on. But the nice thing about it is that as you do it yourself, you can make up process and alter it and change it as you go along. And you can enjoy the sense of what it might mean for the next idea of the next pot. So in a way that there's a kind of ongoing process understanding that the craft and design become a continuous process, so that your hands are telling you as much about where the possibilities are as your thought process. And you check it, they check against each other. It's a great idea as long as it does what you hoped it might. And if it doesn't, you change it. One of the things that interests me are truncations. I mean, sections. Remember in drafting, you'd make a section through something.
Right.
And then you'd show, well, when I draw, I'm always drawing the section of something. And I really love it when I can express, to me, truncating this form at its terminus. There's something really very revealing about the curviness of this. And you really, if you know anything about boats, that's really exciting when you are stern of say like a 40-foot ketch or something, and you're astern and you look at it and you see the transom in the back, and then you see all the lines of the hull going off toward the amidships. It's a gorgeous sight, if you like. I'm interested in inside outside, in other words, the pot's a residence. The wall of the pot is a thing that separates the exterior from the interior, which is pretty obvious, but also it's like in a residence or in a fortress, or it makes a safe or enclosed place, and that's what interests me very much. First, I started doing it just for formal reasons, and now I've become interested in what its meanings are in terms of what kind of evocation they make. All the forms that are hollow, if you want to call it that, have a way into them and a way out of them. And that's one of my canons, or one of my rules that I keep for myself, that they all have either windows or doors or holes that let you in and let you out. It's really important to me, at least in my mind, that I don't become a parody on myself. So both cones really were terrifically even. Here's the firing record, and here are the cones. This is one of the cones. This was the one that was down in the bottom when I fired it. So in the temperature ranges of going on at 6 at night, heating it up all night, just getting the things, be sure that it was dry, and then firing it through the day until it went off at 8:45 at night and went on at 6 o'clock the night before. And then I fired it. When it gets to a certain temperature, you fire it back down so it doesn't cool too quickly. So and then that went off at 9:30 in the morning. I turned it back on at 6 o'clock in the morning and fired it for 4 more hours and then shut it off. So it really worked well. The firing was good. With the initial grinding, the hand grinding of the insides and curves where you just simply can't get with a tool, and then doing all these innies where planes meet, I probably have spent 50, 60 hours of nurturing surfaces to be responsive to my touch. So this idea of giving form to spirit, to me, I've gotten so that that's part of some thing that goes way beyond ideas. It's something more ancient or more deeply seated, maybe.